Hey everybody, welcome to the Psychology Quick Minute brought to you by TestubeIQ.com. Let's take a quick minute and look and see what's going on in the world of psychology today. So, CNN ran a story about an experimental form of conversion therapy done in the 1970s by a psychology student named George Rekers. For those of you who don't know, conversion therapy is a therapy in which they try to change the sexual orientation of the recipient of therapy. This study has been coined the Sissy Boy Study, and was designed to take little boys with feminine tendencies and do things to get them to change. Usually these things were behavioral techniques, and some of them were quite brutal. One of the boys from this study, Kirk Murphy, killed himself 30 plus years later, and the family has begun to blame the therapy. A major problem with this is that we are looking at the therapy through today's eyes. In the 1970s, homosexuality was considered a mental health disorder, not just by Joe Blow, but by the American Psychological Association, the body responsible for the code of ethics for all psychologists, as well as the makers of all of the diagnostic categories for mental health. They are not a big deal, they are the big deal in psychology. So for them to say it was okay at the time should carry more weight than someone who did research on a principle set by the APA. If, in 30 years, people start thinking cognitive behavioral therapy is a form of immoral discrimination, I hope everybody who had anything to do with it doesn't get singled out like this. Aside from not blaming the APA, the family is also not placing any blame where it belongs. There is no blame on Kirk for killing himself. I'm pretty sure he's the one who did it, since it is suicide. They are not taking blame for themselves either. The mother put him in this therapy. How in the world are you going to blame alcohol for getting your son drunk when you poured it down his throat? Own up to that aspect of it. If you really think that the experiment led to his suicide, ask yourself who was responsible for putting him in that experiment. A 5-year-old needs permission of a legal guardian to do anything like that. Another aspect that is being overlooked is that the research was funded by a federal grant. In order to get a grant, you have to send in a proposal. Whatever government agency issued that grant read what it was about and not only didn't disapprove of it, threw money at it so that it could get done because they felt it was vital enough research to do so. If you want to blame someone, blame the victim. Blame yourself for putting them in therapy. Blame the U.S. government. Blame the Institutional Review Board of UCLA for approving that testing on human subjects. Blame the APA. And then once you are there, look at the researcher himself. Having said all of that, it's preposterous to believe that one factor caused the suicide, or that someone other than a person who commits suicide should be held responsible for a suicide. This has not yet been brought to legislation, but with how much press it has gotten, and with how many ambulance-chasing lawyers there are, it most assuredly will. And when it does, Rekers will most certainly be found accountable and will have to pay some exorbitant amount of money because people feel they need someone to blame when something like this happens, and because what was done in the past seems so heinous today. So, who do all of you think is to blame for this? This has been the Psychology Quick Minute brought to you by TestubeIQ.com. Until next time, this is Krang, urging you to think